very first episode of Soul of the Pacific with my first guest, Leo Tanoi. My dad's brother married Leo's dad's sister. So Leo's auntie and my uncle were husband and wife. And because in the Pacific, like many cultures in the world, in fact, it's probably more the case than not the case, we have an extended family structure. So Leo and I just call each other cousin. You're going to get to know Leo through just 3 questions I'm going to ask him. The first question, Leo, is what is your connection to the Pacific?
Thank you very much for, first and foremost, for having me on this inaugural interview for your podcast. My connection to the Pacific, I have many connections to the Pacific through who I am as a person, through my ancestors. Both parents are Samoan, of Samoan heritage. I'm very proud Samoan, born in the diaspora, born in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, in Mangele or Mangere, South Auckland, and being educated in South Auckland, and then coming here to Australia. So through my family, through our culture, our people have been in the Pacific, and our people as Polynesians, wherever we are today, have a royal connection to the Pacific, and our ancestors were chosen by the spirits of the nature of the world, or God, or however you want to see it, to be the first people to discover Polynesia and the South Pacific. So we have a very strong connection to the Pacific through our culture. And then secondly, as my work, I work in the Pacific. We're busy building what we call the future of Pacific arts here in Sydney and New South Wales. So there's an ever-increasing number of Pacific Islanders that have migrated here, and that's where I'm focused. So I worked in different areas of community, assisting New South Wales Council for Pacific Communities back in its early days, and then working with Samoa Council here. My parents were involved in that as well. So I try to get involved as much of community work and the community work that I do within the Pacific across all sectors, education, welfare. I like to use arts and culture, traditional and contemporary, as a platform for making artworks that can address areas as a new language, and it can become a job. Our parents brought us up to be doctors and lawyers and this and accountants and footballers and all of this, but now, after 2 to 3, 4 generations of our people in the arts and culture Pacific all working and creating stuff, it's only getting stronger. And now there's all these new pathways that have been, our Pacific youth have come through and into these education areas and started up a lot of areas that is very useful, including creating pathways for arts and culture as a viable practice and a job. So that's the short and sharp of kind of things that I do with the Pacific.
So your connection to the Pacific is in your DNA through your mum and your dad. You were born in the Pacific itself in Aotearoa, New Zealand. By birth, you're connected to the Pacific through your DNA and your Earth ancestry.
That's correct.
Then your work, you are heavily connected by the sounds of it, because I'm not in Australia and I spent most of my adult years in London. I'm completely unaware of this depth of connection that you have, Leo. So, wow, That sounds amazing, all of the work that you've done within and for the community. And then last but not least, you are currently located in the Pacific. And I think people forget that Australia is in the Pacific and it is a Pacific island. Yes, it's a continent, but it also qualifies as a Pacific island.
Correct.
This leads me to my next question for you. And don't feel you need to be limited to Samoan, because your answer may not come from the Samoan culture. It may come from another Pacific culture. So, of all of the cultural practices and traditions that are in the Pacific, which one resonates with you the most and why?
Only because I'm of Samoan heritage within the Pacific, and I can only speak about my experiences. One of the best cultural practices is our service to our families, and the continuance of that whole cultural structure that we have is great, but within that hierarchy of chiefs and untitled people and rituals and everything, I think the cultural practice of serving for the benefit of the community is important in the past as it is in the present and will be in the future. O le ala o le pule o le tautua, which is the pathway to rule is service. So for me, watching my father and my mother in service as Samoans do, service to their family, service to their extended family, and then service to their church, and then in Samoa, further service to the district that the titles all become. So it's a thing of service. From learning the service, then you learn about the practice of the culture. And within that framework, there's a lot, from language to material culture to the stories, the wisdom passed on for 3.5 to 4,000 years in terms of father to son, mother to daughter, and all of that, within the service framework, you can learn that as well. And part of the service is someone to maintain the actual link, cultural link. And then from that, you can get language, if you like, to further clarify those things. Trying to pinpoint the kind of like binding sort of thing that holds our culture and our connection to who we are and to our ancestors. I believe, is through the service and learning how to serve our people and teach them, like how the elderly have become strong through their wisdom is through their experience. And so if we can just get a little bit of that, it really helps sustain that service. And that I think, one of the main things as part of the service is that connection to family. As we travel through time, if we don't do the service, then there's kind of like a disservice to the next generation.
I love that you've brought this in, and this is totally unplanned. This was the Samoan proverb that I chose to underpin this podcast, that the path to leadership is through service. And Leo, for the benefit of people who aren't Samoan, who don't have any experience of Samoan culture, and also for those young people out there that are searching for a deeper connection to their own ancestry, are you able to give a tangible example of what you mean by service and that path to leadership, maybe through your own father's or mother's examples that they gave to you when you were growing up? Are you able to share one of those?
My mother, she was 2003. She was in Samoa, and our culture, we're very cryptic sort of people as well, in a way, superstitious, and that we're also we're outside of some Christian perimeters as well, and the things that our ancestors have carried over. And so one of the I've read so many. I love reading academic papers written by Samoans, especially Tuia Tuatapua Tamasese is leading one of the 4 leading Tamaainga titles in Samoa, and he has a lot of knowledge and wisdom or cultural references. One day I was at Campsie and my mum, she was in Samoa, and in and I thought to myself, oh my God, Dad died like about, maybe 6, 7 years ago. I wonder who's going to have that title that he's got from my mum's family, Lalau title. And so I was walking up to the shop, and then I came back, and then I came in, opened the door, and the phone rang. And then I looked at the phone, I picked it up, and it was my mum. And I said, "Oh, Mum, how are you going?" And she was going, "Good, good. Look, I just want to tell you something." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Yeah, we had a talk with the family over here, and they want you to take that title that your dad had." And I was looking around, and I was thinking to myself, all right, so this is part of our cultural references, is that we can telepathically, or when you think about things or dream about things, there's this connection that Western culture, right? They set up these things that
Do 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 do. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of those sort of things happened. So essentially, she was calling me to serve the family officially within the framework of the Matai, the chief. And I was like, oh, no. I'm not keen on it.
Would you like to explain what being a Matai and being a chief entails in the Samoan culture? Because a lot of people hear the word chief, and I feel like they don't necessarily understand the depth of what that means when you accept
All right.
a title.
So I can talk about, try to,
Okay.
so essentially Samoans, and that we come from a chieftain system, a titular system. So our families have titles, and that the titles are passed on through time as a chief from one generation to the next generation. And so in the generation where everyone's living, that someone has to take that title. So the title could be 5 generations up to John, or John Brown, for example, right? So we're all descendants of John Brown. So someone in the pyramid of all the John Browns in the generation that's living, and all those that have the gift to bestow that title, choose someone. So in this particular case, my mother and her sisters and them had the gift to bestow the title on themselves. They actually skipped themselves and went one generation down to the next generation, who in our culture, under the top generation, and they have the gift, and that someone has to hold that title. Say John Brown. In this particular case, my father was bestowed the Lalau title in 1986 from my mother's family. And so that title, after my dad held it, as I was recalling, I was wondering who it was, and then booyah, there you go, it's me. So I actually, then the official thing is that my mum's brother and sisters and their husbands and their wives, they all come and do what we call a savali, a walk. And by coming there to my place to come and talk to me, they wanted to officially get me on board to take that title. So all Samoan families will go through this, and most Samoan people that probably don't know or are aware of the system and how it works, is that it's those who are in the gift of giving, who are the generation above you, your parents. They will select one of them to take the title, and then through time, they will see whose service is to that. It's not to say that all my other cousins didn't serve. It's they will be sitting there watching all of the grandchildren, all of the children and the grandchildren, and they will make up their minds collectively who's going to go first to bring into there. So then to touch a little bit on terms of the actual cultural practice in Samoa, we call anga nu'u. Anga is the way of the nu'u, or the cultural practices of the country. And then in your village, where there's 300 and something villages, you all have and do a copy of that process, and you call it in your village anga I whanua, whanua's land. So the practice of that anga, the federal things, in this particular case, bestowing titles, how people do it in the villages is similar, but they will do things a little bit different according to their village. So in the bestowal of the titles, you have to go to the residence of that title in Samoa. So Lalau comes from Salsakele, and that title was made 600 years ago, and it was become famous in Samoan history is because my ancestors, Lalau and his brother, stole Salamasina's baby. And we were the ones that stole the baby and brought it down to my the village and Lalau. So I'm like about one of 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 Lalau possible candidates in our tree, our branch. The one in our family, and then there's like about a senior Lalau, and then there's about 10 of them in the 10 to 20 in the village. Then all the other Lalaus, maybe 300 to 400 of us outside the world, we in control of our Sa Lalau, Sa, our extended family of Lalau. So yeah, that means I have to, my mum and her sisters were my board. And so they're the board members. And so I become the chief. And then if I was in Samoa, then I would sit with the chiefs in the Sālalo, talking about the laws, the church, and anything to do with the village, the economics and that. But we're outside here. So, it's different in Samoa, as we know, and then it's different in the diaspora. So the Lalau goes outside of Samoa and does his work with his title within his family, and then he has a connection back to the homeland where the title is from. You have to register your title in the Lands and Titles Courts, the registry, and they've got laws about it now. So yeah, so that's how Samoans do it. All Samoans belong to royal families. There's 10 royal families that's from 11 districts. And each 11 districts, you have 2 leading orator titles. And then for, say, about 15 to 20 villages in these districts, 11 districts from the west of Samoa, from Savaii all the way to the east of Upolu, there's 11 districts. Every district knows every main title, or we call ao, so all the ao, the big titles, they combine to become 4 titles, which is the tama ainga, which is the child of the families. So and then those titles, so all our titles add up to more titles, like a pyramid. And so we have 10 royal families, 10 main royal families that all other royal families break off from. And then they're broken into 2 dynasties that range over, say, for example, the 2 dynasties is Sa Maletor, the descendants of the Maletor, the shark warrior, and then the Sa Tupua, which is the male titles, which is the dominant titles, and they're the longer ones that go right back up to 1,500 years ago, that connect back to the east coast of Samoa, American Samoa, that have the genealogy that goes to 3,500 years. So ultimately, throughout Samoa's history from west to right to American Samoa, yeah, we have in Western Samoa 2 dynasties, and Tupua is the one that my title's from, is that we stole the baby and then brought it to our side, and then made the baby marry this is true story. You can actually go to the Lands and Titles Court or come to our village in Sasakele. The old people, they'll tell you the story, because that's our cultural knowledge, and that's our cultural thing, and we share it because ultimately Salamasina, she had a girl to another guy, her bodyguard.
Can I just quickly interject here for those people that are not up with Samoan royalty? When he says Salamasina, he is talking about Queen Salamasina, who was one of the longest reigning monarchs in Samoa. So just to give you that context.
Yeah, so she, Samoan politics at that time was the west of Samoa was kind of like under rule of the east, the Manu'ins. So, and then when the Tongans married into the Manu'ins, then that's when those Manu'in Tongans dominated the west of Samoa, which is Upolu and Savaii, and subjugated. It was a lot peaceful because at the end of the day, we're the same people. It's a long period of time, and that long period of time, people change and they marry, but we are still rooted, or the bongaki, or the roots of all their genealogies, and our genealogies is from these American Samoans. And so by the time the Samoans fell out with the rule of their Tongan Manu'ins that were ruling in Upolu and Savaii, and booted them out. And that was the beginning of the Malietoa territory, the shark warrior, that was kind of like behind that and the rest of Samoa as well. And so that was 900 years ago. And then 600 years ago, that's when Salamasina was born. And then her son, Queen Salamasina, her son, my ancestors that I'm descended from this title, Lalau, is, I know all of this because I'm a Lalau title holder. And so I talk to the Lalaus about that particular history, and that's our history. We are called Ainga Tali Malama, family that received the light. Tali, receive, Malama, light. And so that is the baby. And then when Lalau, my ancestor, asked his brother, what's this? And they said, oh, it's the royal baby we stole. And his first reaction, which is his salutation today when people talk to Lalau, is Wa whanga malama le aso. Whanga, beach, malama, Bryden. So they were running through the village at night, and he says to his brother in the dark, once his brother told him that it's the baby crying that they stole, that's what he told him. And to this day, 600 years later, that is my salutation. When other chiefs, they know, especially from our district, they know the Lalau title and the relevance to all the other titles in the district. They say, greetings to you, the one who receives the light. Because at the end of the day, Lalau actually took the baby off them and brought them up, and he became the chief in the village called Sa Le Sa Tele, where Lalau's from. Very, very taboo and sacred. That's the name of our village. And then he brought the child up and started marrying, finding suitors for Salamasina. And then that's why we're called, part of our job is at that time was what you call finding royal suitors, Yep. So all the royal families today come from ultimately from what we did. And so we're called Whausu Ngafa or Ainga Tupu. Whausu is to organize, Ngafa, organize suitors to marry the royal lady, the baby. So then all of the titles ended up, and 2 to 3 generations down was Fui Maongo, and Fui Maongo's salutation is called Ngafatasi, the one Ngafa for the whole country. And then his son was called Tupua, and so that's the beginning of the dynasty. So a lot of the responsibility of being a chief is all sorts of service. Service from kala is telling stories or oratory, because the superstructure is chiefs, elites, and then elites, high chiefs or spiritual chiefs. That's the makeup in the village, is high chiefs, and then their orators is kula fale. Poles that hold the house up. Tula is the poles, fale is house. So their job is to speak for the elites, who the sacred chiefs, and they kind of like, they hardly say much, but they're like the president, and then the kula fale is like the prime minister. And so the kula fale is, depending on different lineages within the village, that's the kind of like a short, brief superstructure of the villages. So every village in Samoa has that structure, and that everybody in Samoa, their hierarchy comes from either the Sa Tapua, where the baby was called Tapua, and or Sa Maleko. So that's kind of like a short history of, the main thing is understanding that we do have a hierarchy. We're very hierarchy and titleist system, and as well as we've integrated the the Church of Israel, the Christian church, into the, as Samoans have always said, and we're very not only are we superstitious and all of this, but we're actually have people that can see the future, and that they tell us in very elusive and mannered language, poems, and that about the, how the gods of the past are coming, how they're going to come into the future, and they're going to come in this way. So we accept one of the sayings, or is in Samoan, is that e fau po fau au. Fau means to make. They're generally like fau fale or tufunga is making a house, or fau boats, you're making a boat. So fau au means day, and fau po means night. So the spiritual journey of Samoans is continuously made night and day, night and day. So when we had pre-Christian, we had Nawhanua, there was religions before Nawhanua, and that the expectation of the Samoans in their theological, cosmological, all of that, is that they're very open, that their spirituality over time changes through a manifestation of a new form in the physical world. And in this particular case, Christianity. But us as Samoans, we know, that built into our culture, genetics, or whatever you call it, whasinomanga, our identity, through our culture, our languages, our practices, so when we see Samoans, we know straight away, that's be careful and be very respectful, because these people, they could look, poor and all of this, but they're like leading chiefs from different royal families, so we need to, our culture always dictates that we be nice to people, and that, we serve, and service also not meaning only our families, but everyone. So that's why probably one of the kind of like first attractions is the ability to serve through the church.
How does being a Matai, how does that manifest in your day-to-day life, Leo? How, as a modern day Samoan, how does, and a modern day Samoan who's not living in Samoa, how does that manifest in your day-to-day reality?
Well, in terms of service, my family, the board, they contact me. If I fall out with the board, then there's no contact, and then I'll have to contact other members of the family to understand where the family's standing on certain issues. So service through finances, money, for assisting families to build houses, to assisting people to come over. My father and mother and their generation did most of the work then. My service today is really about staying in touch with lands and titles disputes, understanding genealogy further, and financial assistance where I can to births, deaths, and marriages. That's the expectation of, so there's a lot of sacrifice in terms of finances, where you don't have money. You're only really meant to give what you can. Back in the old days, when our parents were alive, they would turn up and all talk and discuss certain births, deaths, and marriages and agree to give a certain amount of money. Some people go home and gumumu or complain, and then some people just go in. Sometimes you can't do it, and there's a saying in Samoa for when you can't do financial service on that particular event is o mako ngi o oi kai au, or it's you today and them tomorrow. I have to be careful what I say on the internet, because Leo Tanoi is Leo Tanoi, but when he's got his titles, people can look at that, including my family members, may not be happy of what I've said online, and then can make complaints to the board. There's a lot of responsibility and there's a lot of sacrifice, and that comes part of it. And it's not an easy job. It never was. You just try your best. And I just seen my parents, I'm not the same as them. So you only can do what you can do. You can give what you can give.
I want to come all the way back to Queen Salamasina and the stolen baby. What baby and why was it stolen by Lalao? Basically is it Lalao that stole the baby?
No, his brother.
Ah, okay, right.
Te whāwi malo, and there's many versions, in Samoan culture we have even sayings to explain the many versions. E talalasi means there's so many, and e mau ese ese, and everyone has a opinion of that history that has been brought down, even in your own family. So in the Salalau, there's quite a lot of differences within the rendering of the story, but for Samoa, they will come to our village to hear that. But in how things pan out in the West, people that's not even from our village are even writing books about this history, because we're all down on the baseline down here related to lineages that connect all the way back up to Salamasina. So Salamasina, she was the queen of Samoa. She united the Samoa. Samoa was divided into 11 districts, which had 4 titles, and they called them, we know them now as Tama Ainga, the children of the family, meaning that all these great families, 4 that go all the way up to 1,500 years ago, then connect to 3.5. So Salamasina was like about 600 years ago. Around there. Sorry, I'm not looking at anything. I can be very specific, but and excuse me to my family in that if I get it wrong. But I'm just giving you the outline. And so at that time, her father, Tamalulangi, he's from our side on your father's side and my father's side on West Coast Upolu. Kui'aanga is the district title. So the Kui'aanga, that's his daughter, Salamasina. So Kui'aanga Tamalulangi married the daughter of the King of Tonga and got Salamasina. So Salamasina was bestowed all the 4 titles, Tui'anga, Kui'aanga, Kuiakua, and then they're the male ones. And then the other 2 is from the Malekua lineage, or Ngatoitele and Vaitamasorii. So those titles ruled Samoa independently, Western Samoa, up until Salamasina connected all of them.
So she united all those titles effectively. Within the
That's
one
right.
person, there was a unification of all the titles.
Yes, and she's known for a peaceful, queenship at that time. So Samoa was not in war under her rule. So she, having the 4 titles, she would travel to all the capitals of those titles and then administer, what she needed to do to understand in every district and all those villages within the districts, all those titles, what was happening there. And she would, come in, be the peacemaker internally. So all those 4 titles were heavily contested anyway, and through war. And so after all, Nafanua's religion, their people, they were the ones that helped Salamasina and Lalo and them unite the title. So what happened was, after the war, and they unified all the 4 titles into one, and it was Salamasina. And they came to Salamasina and said, all right, you're the queen now. And she was a very young girl. And so all the 4 districts, they all had 2 main orators that represented all the districts. So there was 2 particular orators that wanted Salamasina to marry the Tono Maipea, Nafanua lineage, who were the army that backed all of the winners of those 4 titles. Then Salamasina was able to sweep them up. So the military, the Nafanua people regime, from Savai'i and all their different networks, they helped all the 4 different wars, and therefore they wanted Salamasina, or actually it was Salamasina's auntie, or who was her father's first cousin, was meant to be the queen, Levalasi. But Levalasi said, oh no, I don't want to be the queen because I've got the baby. And if I'm the queen, she's not allowed to touch the baby. They were very, very sacred in those days. You can't look at people in the eye. You're not allowed to look at people in the eye, and if you're sacred, you're not allowed to be touched by anybody. So what Levalasi did was told the messengers of Nafanua to go back to Nafanua and tell Nafanua the religion, because Nafanua actually lived earlier. And so the religious gods, or the servants, they sent them back to tell Nafanua that can I give it to my adopted daughter Salamasina, my cousin, Tamalangi's son? And they said, we'll go back. Ultimately, they came back and they said, all right. And so then she was happily gave it to Salamasina. Then she can continue looking after her baby. And Salamasina became the queen. And then, as I was saying, it was Lalau that started the marrying her to the Savai'i Tono Maipea Nafanua religion people, because they were the army. So they wanted one of their people. So that was called Tapu Mānaia. And so Salamasina had an earlier child, which was a girl. So it came from Levalasi, a girl, down to Salamasina, and then her daughter was called Fōfoi Vauese, hatched in strange lands. Because she
was she born in Tonga or something?
No, she I think it alludes to it wasn't the Tono Maipea's child, it was her bodyguard's child. Because she was the daughter of the king of Tonga, her mother was the daughter of the queen of Tonga. She had Tongan bodyguards, and so she was in love with her bodyguard, and she only took she was forced into marrying the Tono Maipea guy from the army and that, and he was a player. And so he had all these girls on the side and all of that. And so what happened was she accepted, but she took off into the bush and consummated her love with her partner. And then, as things went by, she just confronted her husband and told her, hey, look, you're a player. You got all these girls all over the place. This child in my womb is not yours. And then, they started hiding the Tongan guy. They took him off to Tonga, but he got assassinated by her husband's people. Ultimately, they had to assassinate him. So what happened was then she had a son to the actual Tono Mai Pea guy, which is
Okay.
and that's
So
the
at
baby.
this point, she's got two. Let me make sure I've kept up here. So at this point, she's got two children. The first son to the bodyguard, Tongan bodyguard.
The girl is from the
Oh,
bodyguard.
girl. Okay. So an illegitimate girl from the Tongan bodyguard, and then the legitimate boy from her husband.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so we stole the boy, who was
Oh, what?
my
I thought you were
ancestors
going to say you stole the girl, but no, you stole the boy. Okay.
stole the boy, and then we took the boy down to Falealili and hid him right down there, and we worshipped him. And so um, they were looking and looking and looking for who stole the baby, and they couldn't find out where that was, but they found out that down at Falealili there seemed to be some weird stuff going on down there where they've got a baby that they're worshipping. And then Salamasina went down and visited them, and they said, yes, it is your baby. And she was so surprised how sacred they treated this boy. So the line continued, the royal line continued for 3 to 4 generations under the girl. So it became Salamasina to her daughter. Meanwhile, the boy was down at Falealili and that district, and they just left him alone. They just let those people in Falealili just worship that baby and look after him and that. So Salamasina let that happen because her father was stolen in the same way from our district, where your father and our parents are from. They were stolen 1 generation earlier, Salamasina's father, in the same way. So Salamasina said, well, I found my son. My dad was stolen like that too. I'm my dad's daughter. Now my son got stolen. And she went down there and saw how well they looked after them. So she said to them, okay, you keep him and just look after him. And I know where he is. Thank you very much to my ancestors for looking after them. And so then she goes back and continues her job, and her daughter, Forfoi Vawese, hatched in strange lands, alluding to her
Lineage.
bodyguard
Yeah.
lineage,
Yeah.
became the next queen of Samoa. So it went from Salamasina to Forfoi Vawese. Then Forfoi Vawese had a daughter, Taufo, and then Taufo's sister was called Sina, and their son was called Asum Malama, and that lineage went down there. And then what happened was Salamasina's dad's other line, where we come on that side, that's when it jumped from Salamasina's line there to Tuala, her older brother, because Salamasina was the youngest of 10 kids, and the oldest was Tuala. So our ancestors come from Tuala, and that in West Coast Upolu. And so the lineage jumped over there for about 1 year, and then, or one reign, and on the way out, that King Muangututia, that's where we're descended from in Aanga, he actually handed the title back to Fuimaongo in that area where the baby was, the stolen baby, and were looking for a new king. So they made this baby called Tupua. Muangututia made the King Tupua, and everyone who had a vested interest in the title challenged King Muangututia. And then Muangututia said, Mate maya la Tupua, guess my riddle. Because Tupua also means riddle. And so then when they saw the baby, the little boy, they were saying, who is this boy? 3 generations down. So it goes, and it was Fuimaongo's son on the boy's side, right? And so they did what they call the tearing of the banana leaves to count how many families he's from. Sai lo fa'i. Fa'i's banana. Sai is to peel it back. And they worked out that, oh my God, this little kid, he's actually a descendant of Salamasina. All right, bang, there you go. So the tapua is the riddle. Mate mea la o tapua. Tapua, I think, is also Jupiter. But in this particular case, it's tapua is a riddle. So then everyone knows his riddle was that he was connecting the Salamasina's daughter's female line back to the male line.
Yeah.
And that line becomes now the other dynasty, the baby tapua, the riddle. That's the lineage, and everybody is connected to the Sa Tapua, is the descendants of Tapua. Most of the Samoan royal families on the baseline that we all descend from. Anyway, I just happen to descend directly from aristocratic kidnappers. Yeah,
And
so
with that whole story, I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder there is such, I mean, Samoans and Tongans. For me, from living so far away from the Pacific, when people say, oh, where are you from? And then I have to explain my ancestry. And I would always say, well, I'm Samoan. And then they go, oh, is that like Tongans? And I say, well, yes and no, because you can't really separate the two fully because the histories are so integrated. And I always used to joke, they say, oh, which one came first, Samoans or Tongans? And I say, well, if you speak to a Samoan, it's Samoans. If you speak to a Tongan, it's Tongans. Actually, it's probably both, right?
yeah.
And from the story you've just told me, I mean, Tongan DNA is intricately woven into the Samoan DNA.
Yeah, well, that's where knowledge is power and good power, because how it happens in real time in real life is that the majority of people that understand this is at the knowledge end or top end, and the masses, unless you know, and which is the main thing that's going to assist you in this, and that everyone's got a different sort of mix of it, because that was 600 years ago. And so your genealogy just goes all over the place, and it lands down on this time of age, and that everybody has some sort of Tongan, Fijian, Cook Island mix anyway. And it's really to understand your genealogy, and your village history will tell you about that. It will point to it. And so Samoans like to joke in Samoa and here as well. And they say, oh, you don't understand that because you're Tongan, and they're speaking in fluent Samoan because they're alluding to their Tongan ancestry that everybody knows because they're all orators. They all know genealogy and that. And then someone say, yeah, that's because you guys are Fijian, so they'll point it out. And so, yeah, if you know your genealogy, and it doesn't become a problem because you understand it. For example, there was a classic occasion at the opening of the University of South Pacific, and the Tongan king was there, and the Fijian king was there, and the royal people, and then the Samoan royal king were there, and they're all academics, and they're sitting there in the house, right? And all the servants of all the countries. And then what happened was, when the Fijian king was there, their people would come and they would bow down from the door, and then bow down all the way in front of all the kings and all of that. And, and then the Tongan asked his servants, they said, tell your servants to come. So the Tongan servants, they came and they were all bowing down, and they, sing and all of this. And then when they asked Maleko to tell his servants and that to come, his servant climbed through the window, the back window, and just came in and sat right down next to them. And they were all looking. And then Maleko says, all right, you can go now. And to the little kid. And the little kid gets up and jumps back out the window and walks off. And then they say to him, how come all our people come and bow down like this in front of us and all of that, and your guy just comes straight through the window, walks in front of us, and just comes and sits down next to you? And Maleko explains to him that, in Samoa, as you might know, that everybody's a king. and that you don't know that, the genealogy of that child, because we're only chosen from a democratic process within our families, right? And that doesn't mean that kid over there has got lesser genealogy than you. He could have a super genealogy as a little kid. So, they're the sort of stuff that, for me, in an everyday thing, talking to Maori and Pacific Islanders, Polynesians, we are descended from the same people. It's just that it's a very, very long time. And it's like 3.5 to 4,000 years. Although we're young as a culture compared to other cultures of the world, we are very connected through the Ngafa genealogy. There's a guy, Levy, through oral culture and being a professor of 2 to 3 different areas like archaeology, genetics, and all of that. Everyone is theorizing at the moment as to where our ancestors and that came from. So I can summarize where he's being a high orator in the east of America, where we know they hold a lot of information, and having a very high title in oratory in the new modern Samoa, Western Samoa, or the independent state of Samoa. He's written a book. He's a professor of many kinds. And he thought he's going to have a shot, that all the Palangis are writing about our culture and all of that, but they don't have the oral history to have a context in that. They only read about it. They don't, what I'm saying. So I've read his book, and I'll send you the link to it as well.
I too have noticed a desire from outside of the Pacific region to be learning and theorizing on the origins of the Polynesians. And I love that you are bringing in a source and provenance that actually is a mix of the oral original information, which also is very tricky because, as you just pointed out in this podcast, you will get different versions depending on who you are speaking to and where they are from and where they've got their story from, as in their route to the story. It will be different to another village and another family. So
Even the same families.
yes, yes. So there's also a lot of interest in just the Pacific itself, I feel, going forward. I think this is touching on an earlier point you made about there will be increased interest in this part of the world because water is so important and critical to human beings. And the knowledge and wisdom that the people who have managed to survive and thrive, with water being the equivalent, the waterways of the Samoan and Maori and Hawaiian and all the nations in the Pacific, the waterways are the equivalent of highways everywhere else.
That's correct. And all those theories by academics, non-Pacific academics, they're trying their best to do the work, but I know from reading a lot and understanding parts of our culture that the big part of it is the oral history. For example, I do lecture at summer school for Sydney University, and I was invited by one of the leading archaeologists, James Fletcher. And so he's heard of me, and he heard of what I do and what I say in relation to Pacific material culture within museums and stuff and projects I've done within that space. So I was invited by them to come and give a presentation on the Samoan. At first, it was the Samoan Civil War in 1830 to 1819, something like that, between Mataafa and Samoa and all of that. But I had to preface that by letting people understand the history before that. and where it came. So I had to give them some ancient history. And
Mhm.
so I was fortunate enough to have read Levy's book. And so I was kind of like just talking about the theories that this Samoan academic was saying, in that how our ancestors, one of the important strain of our ancestors came from ancient Egypt.
Mhm.
From them traveled into the Levant, and this is one, or we're going to one of the first, because it isn't the first time people from Egypt and the Levant and the Middle East and Asia came to the Pacific. We're one of the first that left, possibly pre-Abraham. So that's like 5 to 10,000 years ago, left Egypt. So we were then moved into the Levant when places weren't even called Israel. We were actually with those people there. And then we mixed with some of them. And then we moved into Mesopotamia, Iran, Iraq, as we're moving out. And then down West India into what is called Philippines and Taiwan. And so that's where the Austronesian, this whole big linkage to Austronesia and Taiwan. That's, I believe, through the book is what he's saying, and that it's much more complicated than saying in one dimension that we come from Taiwan, because yes, a strain came from Taiwan, but another strain came from ancient Egypt into the Levant, and then they came and they mixed, before coming into Philippines, and that, and this is his theory, and it's for me it's a stronger theory. And then they came from Philippines and Taiwan into Micronesia, Malaysia. And at that time, there had already been a wave of African people that were Philippines that was already there 100,000 years ago. Then another group came 15,000 years ago. And then our ancestors came in that period too. And so again, there's another melting pot there. And then from that melting pot, our ancestors then did what nobody else did, was we jumped the Wallace line, which is in Southeast Asia coming down. And the Wallace line is where the two under the plates, under the earth, and they come and they form a mountain ridge under the water to Asia. So if you have a bath, and from the left of the bath to the right, and then there's like a mountain on the left where Asia is and where our ancestors, the water goes there and it hits that mountain range, it's like big waves, right? And so that's why the most of humanity was unable to jump the Wallace line, because they never had the technology and the boats to. And our ancestors at that time, we were Austronesian, Malaysian, Polynesian, was living with all these people in these areas. We also lived in northern Sepik in Papua New Guinea and fortified ourselves for a couple of 100 years or something there, then came down to Vanuatu, and that's where they do stand. And then from there, they came down to places like Bismarck Islands. And from there, that's when all the academics were listening very closely to what I was saying, because I said to them, and then our ancestors came from the Bismarck and that, and went to Eastern Samoa, then to Fiji, and then to Tonga. And then they were just, I could see the look on their academics, their professors, and so quickly James Fitchner jumps in and tries to, and says, "Oh, you know what Leo means is, that because up to that point, which was like 18 months ago when I did this delivery, it had been in the academic circles that the Polynesians came to Fiji, Tonga, and then Samoa. And so when I told them that no, that's not right, our ancestors came from there and to Eastern Samoa, Tau and Manua, and formed the Tangaloa Tuimanua lineage of Polynesia. And then they went from east to west, and then found everything in Samoa, and then they went to Fiji and Tonga. Well, there's what they call a global stop, a pause, which are 1,000 years old, and then from there they went to places like Fiji, Tonga, Cook Islands, and then the Cook Island mob seem to have been the ones that went to Raiatea, Easter Island via Mangareva, Manga. And so just about the story anyway, 6 months later, the new Y chromosome testing around the world had come out, the final results, and it went through World Academia, and they said that the Polynesians came down to Samoa, then to Fiji, and then to Tonga. And then from those places, they went to Cook Islands, and from the Cook Islands, they went to Mangareva. So if you can hear what that word says, Manga means corner, reva, or lever, a long time ago. So it was the left turn or the right turn. And so if you go left turn at the Mangareva, after that, Tuamotu, behind the islands of where they all came from was Tuamotu, and from that they went to places like Easter Island, Hawaii, and then take a right and you go down to Aotearoa, so that's why there's a very strong affinity with our Maori Pacific Maori Polynesian, that they and their ancestors connected to those places, especially Raiatea and Tahiti, and that have that probably went to America. And so, all the academic papers show that there were people pre-Columbian that went there, and that they were more than likely the ancestors of the Polynesians that mixed with those people, whether they came from Peru and that to Easter Island or vice versa. The academics are more leaning towards the fact that it's probably the Polynesians, because now they've got chicken bones in Argentina and all of that's not from there. And so it's either they went outside into Polynesia and got that and brought it there, or vice versa. And similarly with the sweet potato. So if some of my facts aren't is correct, but that's kind of like from Levy's book, and most academics, Samoan and theological people believe that anyway. They believe, but some of my academic friends, they're just like, man, no, that's not right, geography in those days, and the icelands and the waters and all of that. So
the interesting thing is, this is one of my pet subjects. It just so happens.
Everywhere I go, because I bump into people who are interested, and I said to them, it doesn't make sense for our ancestors to tell us the story for 3,500 to 4,000 years to change our position on that. We've always had our position, and we know who we are. We know what we did. We don't need no universities or anyone to qualify or quantify that. We're living proof. We did it, and that's what academic sort of things look to try and explain it and find a detail, which in a way kind of like is trying to make us prove it. It's almost like a colonial construct in itself, is that we have to prove who we are to you guys, and so you can't just accept that we found all of these places. Before they were saying, the academics were saying, oh no, there's no way mathematically that they could have found this place, that they found it by accident.
Well, there's no way using their understanding of navigational techniques. What they haven't done is actually applied the traditional navigational techniques, or even spoken, from what I can gather, to people like Nainoa Thompson and all those people that are involved in the revival of the traditional ways of navigating the ocean. None of them said, there never seems to be a connection. Levy is probably an exception to this. I haven't read his book, so I don't know. But a lot of them seem to miss that critical, what I feel is the critical connecting point, and that is the navigational knowledge. And because you need to test your theory with the lived and on the water as opposed to on the ground experience. And we didn't just drift and find these places by accident. It was a deliberate navigational route that was made. And also, I feel that because as you said, there's a lot of theories out there, and some of them for me are more sound than others. And I agree with you. What you covered from Levy's work sounds sound, one of the soundest to me. And there is also, why would we not have all been trading with South America? If the water was our like highways and byways, of course we'd be trading with them.
We were the royal people of the sea, and that our job was to look after the sea and look after understanding cosmology and understanding the physical environment and spiritual environment and the contact. And so, like that story I said about the my mother and having that intuitive telepathy or coincidence. It can't, is it pure coincidence that I think that walking up to the shop and then coming back? And that's what Livy also talks about in his book, that is that academics and the Western systems tend to leave superstition and all of that sort of stuff outside of the lab, and that they like to do physical science stuff that they can see, but our people.
Okay, I'm with you now. So they leave out the other senses.
Yes, they leave out everything. And, all the other senses, all the other gifts that God has given us that is human, and that they discard that because of their need to understand it in a lineal, and where our support is not lineal. It's
No,
like we
it's not.
talk very wide transmissions. We've got a big, the wavelength that we're on in our history is in tune with the cosmos. According to our cosmos, Biggie, according to our cosmos.
Hello, Kitty.
We're part of the cosmos, and that we share the same divinity as the cosmos, the stars and everything. And that, for example, Ali'i or Ariki, right? So you got Matariki, Ali'i.
Yep.
So it's pointing to the stars. Which star system is that? Oh, it's the Pleiades.
The
Pleiades, the seven sisters. So our governance on our earth before Christianity is Tamali'i, or chief, is from the Pleiades. So our chiefs of Samoa, believe it or not, we are linked spiritually to the Pleiades. That's where we came from.
I do believe it.
And then when you look at a lot of ancient culture like Africa and Aboriginal, they talk about it in the same way, but we have like even pinpointed our research of ourselves through our culture and wisdom, is that the Ali'i, or the chief, are the Li'i Pleiades, the Pleiades. So all the chiefs, oh, you're the Pleiades, And so a lot of this is brushed over, and, the more our Samoans open up in terms of our cultural leaders and the understanding of these indigenous references in terms of our cultures is really great.
I would love to talk with, much more on ancient cosmology for sure, because, I feel that the ancient cosmology of the Pacific is why I have been deeply drawn into Western tropical astrology, because that is star navigation of a different kind. And funnily enough, when you say Matariki, Matali'i, so there is a branch of Western astrology that is called galactic astrology, and it looks at all the fixed star systems and where they are in your birth makeup. And surprise, surprise, Matariki, or Alkyone, which is the mother star of the Pleiades, is very significant in my makeup, in my astrological makeup.
Yep. It all makes sense, because our governance on this earth is actually pre-Christian, is through the Pleiades system, and that gives us power on this earth. And I think at the end of the day, I could be wrong, but I think that's what they're alluding to in pre-Christian Samoan astrology and cosmology, that our ancestral spirit comes from there, but our bodies come from this earth, you
Yeah, of
know?
course. Of
And
course.
so there's, and so when you talk in the Bible, the Bible even dumbs it down, but it's talking about similar things, langi or le langi, the skies, and the lalolangi. And then we're here. And then when we go, our atua, our God, right? And it's our God at the moment is in the front, is a Christian God. But when we talk about, our
Our God self, right?
our God is us, and we're part of the environment, and
Yep.
that our power comes from our spirit. Well, I think it points towards the Pleiades. That's my little understanding. I apologize if I could be misleading in any terms of data or things. I'm not reading anything. They're just stories that I heard and academic papers that I read, and you have to sift through everything and then talk to your people, about these phenomena, and that's what I meant. The phenomena is kept outside of the laboratory, and then they work on everything else but the phenomena. It's like you're going to wash the baby, but the baby's outside, and
Yeah.
there's no one that you're watching. There's, the baby outside. Bring it inside and start to look at how phenomena and science is actually the same. But if you negate it, then, well, I'm not quite sure if the experiment's going to work, or, what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
Without, if you want to wash the baby, you better put the baby in the bath.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So
It's
I'm
not,
going to get to the last question now, which I
all right,
feel you've probably already answered, and your
I'll
answer
keep this one short then.
will probably be very quick. Yeah. The last question is, of all of the sayings or proverbs that you're aware of, probably from Samoan, a Samoan saying or proverb,
Yeah.
which one would you choose to put into a book of knowledge for the future generations?
Well, I think I've already said it. O le ala o le pule o le tautua. The pathway to rule is service. To be short and frank, there's all types of different types of Samoa. There's Aussies now. There's Aotearoa Samoa, And another saying actually that goes with it is, which a lot of people understand too, is E tu mau whaavae ai sui whainga. The constitution stays the same, but the way we do it, or the materials that we use through time, changes. So, for example, other ceremonies. Everyone does an other ceremony, but to welcome their guests into the village and all of those protocols. But in every village, it could be different. You might, the big chief of the village, resident village, might drink first, or he might drink last, or the village, the people that are coming to meet them, they have a certain way. They receive the cup maybe first or second, you know what I mean? And then they turn up to a village that it's quite different. So the federal law is similar, but people use their way in their whanua on their land. Yeah, so you have like a genetic sort of script that everyone runs by, but then you've got your very own,
Local flavors.
your local, how you do it.
Is there anything that you're up to that you want to share with the audience? And if there's anything they can do to support whatever that is?
Firstly, I'd like to apologize to anybody listening if I've offended anybody. It's part of our culture and oratory that, towards the end of conversations, that you must apologize, just in case you say something wrong that offends something. We normally say, e poto le tautai ai se sela na atui ama. The navigator and the fisherman could be smart, but when he throws the fish into the boat, it misses the boat completely. My dad wanted me to be a priest, but my priesthood is around arts and culture, and my church is the museums and galleries where we can speak in an artistic language. My hope that we can work with the National University of Samoa to bring, and the Auckland University of Wellington to bring Samoan language here so that our people can have something instead of learning French, Greek, and Chinese and all of this. Is like, man, what's the matter with our language? And so my dream in the future is to assist all the academics and the people that's going to make this happen, cultural workers, to bring our cultures here to study it so we can be recognized in the academic level, so that it's not about the subject that we're learning, it's about learning, the ability to learn, and why not learn our culture. So that's one thing that I wanted, that is the big thing behind what I'm doing now, and connecting with people to make this happen is the job in the future, and then bringing it to Australia, right? And so the other thing is artistry and literacy of artistry for Pacific over here. And it's where tangata moana, tangata Pasifika, and that we're one people, and that the lines of colonial division of Australia and New Zealand, we shouldn't look at it that way. We should look at it as that we're one people of the blue continent. We need to I believe, in the end of the day, really connect with our younger generations and people don't like me saying this, but I'm going to say it, is that, well, we need to make our culture sexy again. Yeah, our kids like, yeah, no, we're off here and doing this. And then when you don't be rooted in your culture for whatever reasons, right? The linguistic differences and the challenges from the Samoan parents speaking Samoan and not the kids not speaking Samoan, and they speak English. The natural challenges from that, especially in low economic, and they're easily vulnerable to the environment, and they see quick money and crime and all of this. Our people's economic and intellectual is going to come out more. We're not going to be just the footballers, and the security guards and all of this. No, we're actually intellectually capable of doing so many things, but people tend to focus on negativity. So the general reality is that we're actually doing well as a culture. We just need to tighten up on some areas that really can socially make us look bad. Other than that, our people are going to do well, because we are going to be able to, in this next millennium, I believe, from what I'm looking at and extrapolating off the graph, is that this next 100 years of this first millennium is about Polynesian people understanding actually how we're connected. And then that knowledge of self is going to really increase, and then it's going to feed the further generations as our numbers grow. So we have very high birth rates, especially Samoans, that works for us.
Can I just summarize what you said? Because is it basically that what you're involved in now is to have Samoan culture, language, studies introduced into and as a subject for academic qualification? Did I understand you correctly?
That's correct. And looking at how to make that happen with our academics, I've already spoken to Damon Salissa about it, and he's told me that there's grants and that where you need to access for academics to prove that to the universities, the need for our community and that. And so then I've turned around to the Samoan academics now and talked to them about, I'm looking at which ones, and I'm thinking, well, whichever one comes first, that's great, but it doesn't stop us from bringing another one in or talking to both universities. So yes, that's correct.
I wish someone like you was around when I was growing up. I mean, obviously you were around, but you were still a child too. right?
Yeah, I was a naughty child then, and I'm growing out of it. Um, you know,
So I wish that this had existed when I was growing up, which is part of the reason I've actually started this podcast, because this is for the child that was me, that swallowed the narrative that I was just a dumb islander. And actually, it's taken the majority of my lifetime to realize that I'm not dumb, very far from it.
that's right. For all of us that go through all of that, that whole identity crisis sort of stuff, I tell all of my Samoan afakasi or whatever, there's no such thing as afakasi. It's a construct. We are all Samoans. It's a benefit to speak Samoan, and that's great. But this whole idea that we're lesser Samoans because we weren't born in Samoa, don't speak the language. Even Samoan people who, most of them are switched on, they don't say that. Only negative people say that. Our ancestors left Samoa for the reason of helping other ancestors come over here, and that's it. Us people outside, we are like the navigator people. We continue that navigation into these bigger spaces of
Sure.
the new world, of the globe.
At the end of the day, those who get it will get it, and those who it's not for won't, and they can choose to leave it. So my last question is, with the efforts that you have of bringing this into as an academic qualification, is there anything that viewers can do to support those efforts?
Ultimately, the people behind it will be Samoan academics,
Okay.
and that they're the ones that's going to do all the engineering, the architecture around it, and doing all of the why sort of stuff. And
So is this your plea to the Samoan academics, if there are any watching this, to get in touch with you?
yeah, I don't mind if people get in touch with me. I've spoken to a lot of academics. I believe it happens in God's time, and
Sure.
that's the natural rhythm. And so things just happen. People turn up and they play that role, and you think to yourself, "Wow, was this by coincidence that these people turn up?" Like me and you talking about it, academics coming to Australia, and then I end up, working with them and talking to them. It's all part of the plan. And so I have every faith that the people that will play a part will appear when they need to appear,
Yeah.
and that most of them are already in place. It's just like a plug that's sitting outside the wall. You need to put it in and start pushing and encouraging those who have those skill sets to play that part. And then once we do that, we teach our language, then we need this is the second part of that is once you get the academic and the language and accredited and all of that, and now people are doing that, and there's many benefits from it. The second thing is to organize all the Samoan professionals to come to assist and do what our ancestors did. They were good at building churches, 100%, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands of churches or Samoan churches, but now we need to use that same either apparatus or the processes to create centers of excellence. These are the dreams and aspirations on this side of the Tasman, and that I'm very confident that the people that need to take this position in place, it will happen because God will make it happen. The universe, or Biami, as in the Aboriginal, the environment, it talks to us and we talk to it, the cosmos and God, or however you want to see it, and then it happens for things, including trials and tribulations. They're all part of it, and we just work through it generation by generation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leo, for your time, your energy, your enthusiasm and input. And I'm going to leave that as our first installment of Soul of the Pacific, and sending everybody love from my heart's light to yours. Please like and subscribe so it can reach more people. I really appreciate the support.
If you'd like to do something more tangible, I've created some eye-catching light song designs so you can wear and share the love of the Pacific. Each design contains the light song, the love vibration, for either Samoa, Aotearoa or Hawaii. The colour combinations and patterns come from their star maps and are designed by the stars. Thank you for watching with so much love from my heart.